Right. Thank you very much for your comments and feedbacks. Today we proceed to the second part of our discourse on root cause analysis for internal audit effectiveness. In the first part, I covered the 5W1H essentially, which is what is root cause analysis, why is it necessary, when can it be done, who is responsible, where should it be done, and the how. We concluded the how by going through the 5 steps that's involved in a root cause analysis. And now, in this part 2, I will be taking a look at a couple of methods or tools or approaches that are available to conduct a root cause analysis. And also, don't forget that we have said the root cause analysis is not an end in itself, it's just a platform or a process to identify what are the key issues or the causes of an issue so that the appropriate solution can be provided. And so the first of such tools that we're going to be considering is the 5 why analysis. The 5 why analysis. The 5 why analysis is a root cause analysis approach that is applicable for a very simple problem solving. Just like the name suggests, it's basically a solution where you keep asking why and challenging the answers that comes forth. And it is usually used for quick problem solving or some kind of initial brainstorming, or could also be used for interviews with process owners. How does it work? There's step 1 up to 5, and it's basically asking the question why. Why did this problem occur? Why did this defect occur? Why did this error happen? And you keep iterating the process. As you ask, to take note of the answers that are being provided by the respondents, and from that answer, you ask further whys. So it's pretty much a drilling method to ensure or to guide whoever is providing the answers to continue until he or she provides clue to what may be the real cause of a problem. And so while this process is going on, data gathering is important. Quick analysis of the responses being provided. That's what's covered in step 2. And it's an approach that requires the user to be critical. You mustn't take anything for granted or take it on the surface. Ask all the questions. Include everything that is within radar or within scope. And hopefully, by the time you are asking the final why, which may be number 5, or maybe number 20, or number 15, or maybe less than 5, but we just feel it's called the 5 analysis because it's believed that at least by the time you ask the question why 5 times, you should be getting close to getting an answer. And like typical of any open-ended question, which is what a why is. The why is an open-ended question that allows the respondents to explore and provide different perspectives. There definitely will be more than one answer to the why. And so from every of the answers or responses, it behoves on the one who is conducting the root cause analysis to decipher, to extract, and ask further questions. What are the benefits and the shortcomings of this method? 3 key benefits: its simplicity, the structure, and the fact that it's a good tool to kick off the root cause analysis. very easy to use. It helps a structured thinking, and slows down that race or that rage to conclude or to make a judgment, because you just step back a moment from the process and ask, why is this happening? Could it be this? Could it be that? Of course, there are a few limitations. Number one is that it may not allow for more than one root cause. So there are times that the root causes to a particular issue are more than one. It's not just one root cause. I did mention that earlier when we talk about it, there could be one to many or many to one. There are times you have a problem with just one root cause, or there is a root cause that is causing many problems. So the same root cause is responsible for 1, 2, 3, or 4 defects. Now, because it is largely qualitative, limited data is available for analysis. So it's basically a method that depends on the responses. And now when you say response, that depends on the depth, quality, and content of the response, which may also be influenced by the experience of whoever is responding. So it may give a problem of the fact that it is not repeatable. Because if you ask operator A the same question, depending on his exposure or experience, or what part of the process he is handling, his responses may be different from what the respondent B or C will say. And so therefore, it can be a bit inconsistent in terms of the kind of responses that we get. But of course, if it's conducted quite well, it can provide some clues. A typical example of the 5-why analysis, very simple of its application, is presented here. And as you will see when we go through this short example, that the issue of being 5 is not cast in stone. Because as it is here, at the 5th time of asking this why, there may be more responses, and there are several more whys that should be asked or that could be asked. So take an instance where in a shop floor, maybe in a warehouse environment, a manufacturing setting, in a distribution organization, where there's a lot of logistics and movement of inventories from point A to point B, you may find the use of forklifts very regularly. Now, in such environment, there are also requirements for HSE, health, safety, and environmental factors. Standards that requires how the environment should be. For instance, safety boots should be worn, helmets should be worn, and so many other things. In such an environment, you don't want grease or oil on the floor to avoid slippery. And then all of a sudden, you find oil on the floor. The oil itself on the floor may not be the problem, but it's an indicator of something wrong somewhere. But even if you pick the oil as a problem, for instance, that okay, why is there oil on the floor? A very simple response you might get might be something like one of the forklifts is leaking. And then you zero in and identify the one that is leaking. And then you ask the next question, why is this particular forklift leaking? Why does it have a leak? And then the very simple answer will be that the hydraulic hose is bad. You can ask from that same question, why is the hydraulic hose bad? And from examination, whoever is operating it or people in that same workflow can tell you that one of the fitting hand is frayed. So under pressure of heavy lifting, oil leaks. And of course, you pick that response and you turn it into a question again. Why is a fitting hand frayed? I mean, a logical answer that could be obvious could also be that the hose is getting too old and therefore it's becoming soft, hence the leakage. And so the next question will be, if the hose is getting old and weak, why hasn't it been replaced? Now, the response to that answer may be many, but we've just taken an example that the response here is that somebody is saying, okay, we don't have anybody responsible for equipment maintenance. We can continue beyond the point 5 and say, why isn't there somebody responsible for equipment maintenance? And the answer to that could be HR has not been able to replace the guy who resigned 2 months ago, 1 month ago, a week ago, 3 weeks ago, whatever. And then you go to HR and say, why has this person not been replaced? And HR tells you there's a freeze on recruitment from executive management. You begin to roll that question up and on. Why is there a freeze? Could there be exceptions to certain kind of roles? If there is a freeze within the maintenance department of function, what arrangements have been put in place to ensure that critical roles like this are covered, whether with existing resources or redeployment of available resources? Now, the starting point of our question in this example is simply because there is oil on the floor. There might have been some other things that led to this point. So at the end of the day, if we take the oil on the floor as a problem that we want to solve, we will realize that it is not just the forklift that is the root cause. It is very easy to say it's the forklift that is leaking and then say let's replace the forklift. No. Or continuous questioning has provided insight that the main issue is that we need a maintenance engineer. So not necessarily that we should change the forklift, because if we replace this forklift, we get another forklift. From the fleet of forklifts, what if the next one starts to leak? Are we going to replace all of the forklifts? But then if we have somebody who is in charge of maintenance, he knows when each of these machines are due for services, takes them in for servicing, replace their parts, we can have an efficient flow. So that's how the 5 why analysis works. It's basically a process where you challenge whatever response the process owner is giving you. So as internal auditors, this is something that we can apply, quite simple to use, and it also put the operators on the spot so that they can also think a bit deeper and then challenge whatever is happening. The next tool that we're going to be discussing for the purpose of this session is the fishbone analysis or the fishbone diagram. The fishbone analysis is a tool that helps to put the problem and the possible causes and its effects in a pictorial representation. So first of all, it requires identifying what the problem is and then saying, for this problem, we want to look at what are the possible causes and what are the likely effects of those causes. So in this case, this tool not only focuses on the causes, it also focuses on the effects. So it talks about the cause and the consequences. And so the beautiful part is that it helps to create a visual display, a visual image of the many potential causes for a specific problem and their effects. It is typically useful in a group setting, particularly where you have multidisciplinary teams, people from different teams coming together to brainstorm. Now, a number of things for us to be able to adopt the fishbone analysis is, number one, we need to be able, it will help us to be able to categorize many potential causes. So there's a need to agree on what categorization approach we are going to be using. As we will see shortly, there are a couple of categorization models that can be adopted for the purpose of doing a fishbone analysis. It also helps to bring the entire process into the picture and can be a very good tool for knowledge impartation, for knowledge sharing, for educating the team. To use a fishbone analysis, first of all, you need to create a cause and effect diagram that describes the relationship between the variables. And then you document the undesirable issue at the head of the program. So like the outcomes, what we can call like the symptoms. What are the things that happens? And then now you need to map the various categories of causes, which are looking like the various branches in a fish. And you take the skeleton, the bone of a fish. There is a main one that goes right from the head down to the tail. And then there are other ones that branches out from the main one. So those other ones that branches out from the main one are the ones we call the various causes. Now, for the purpose of fishbone analysis, it's important to agree which categorization method or model we want to adopt. So there are several. But the key and the popular ones are the 6 M's, which is man, material, machine. Or you want to use the process approach, the policy, procedure, people, and plants, where plant is talking about technology. If you go by the man, material, machine, you will also have method, measurables, and then mother nature. Mother nature will be the things that are outside the control of the business, like natural disasters. How do they impact the business? In today's environment, cybercrime could also come under things that are outside of the control of the business. External threats, external events. So these are the various types of categorization. If you are using the service industry, you may decide to use the 4 P's. You may decide to use the 6 M's, which is typical in the manufacturing environment. Or you could decide to use any other type of categorization. So for instance, you could just say, okay, we want to walk through the process. What are the various sub-elements within the process from beginning to end? And so whatever is applicable to your industry or to your environment is allowed. Now, having agreed what categorization method or model we intend to use, then the next thing is to start the brainstorming session, the discussion, and then as ideas come, as options comes, we should be able to attach them to different branches and continue to ask, why does that happen? So if this happens, why does this happen? By the time the fishbone is completed, we should be having some clarity around what is causing the problems that we've identified. And at the end of the day, we may choose to prioritize which ones we want to solve in terms of, okay, we've identified all of these as the causes of different problems. Which ones are the ones with the greatest impact? And so maybe those ones are the ones we want to deal with. As we can see, as we shall see so shortly, we can apply the Pareto rule, for instance. Where do we have 80% of the problem coming? Can we focus our attention on that area? Is it giving us the greatest impact? What you probably will find is that 80% of the impact of that problem may be coming from maybe just 20% of the causes. So maybe it's important to just focus on solving that 20% that is causing the 80% impact and then move on. But at least what the fishbone analysis helps you to do is it helps you to narrow down, and then you can, based on the pictures or the outcome of the brainstorming, you are able to say, this is the area we should be paying attention to. Don't forget, we have said the root cause analysis itself does not provide a solution. It just points us to where the problem is so that we know what to deal with. What then are the advantages and disadvantages of the fishbone analysis? Like we've discussed, and according to the Ionos Startup Guide, the fishbone analysis, first of all, encourages creativity when searching for the causes of a problem. It encourages creativity. It helps people to contribute ideas, simplifies the problem, fairly easy to use, and then helps to categorize the causes. On the other side, it requires some level of discipline to make sure that the diagram is useful. Another limitation is the fact that it uses predefined categories. There are times that the causes of the problem may be outside the defined categorization, the 5 M's, the 4 P's, or whatever. How do you then, articulate such? Sometimes, so it may create a problem of where to put an issue. Sometimes complex correlations cannot be illustrated on the fishbone. I mean, it's where the relationship between what is causing the problem is not as straightforward as something that branches off on the roots. I mean, on the fish diagram. Maybe it's a combination of 2-3 things together as a single factor. Again, like any other root cause analysis tool, they do not necessarily provide a solution, but only illustrates the causes. So the same thing with the 5 why analysis, and maybe with all root cause analysis methods, they are not necessarily going to give you the solution. They are only going to point you in a direction of what the real problem is, or what is causing the problem, so that they can be fixed. The next model is the behavioral engineering audit model. This is a tool that I love, and I like us to pay attention to it because I see its relevance for us beyond just for audit purposes, especially with the growing ESG requirements. You would agree with me that ESG is becoming a very relevant topic, particularly as regulators across the globe are moving it from being a voluntary reporting requirement into regulatory driven reporting requirements. In the months to come, we expect a couple of regulations that will make ESG reporting mandatory. And what that means is that increasingly, internal auditors are going to be factoring ESG into their internal audit plans. Now, the behavioral engineering audit model on its own is a root cause analysis that looks at problems from the perspectives of conduct, behavior, and therefore it narrows down the problem or the causes of any problem to people-related factors. And it categorizes those people-related factors into 2 areas, that they could be organizational factors or individual factors. There are organizational factors that affect how people behave, and then there are individual factors that affect how people behave. And then it came up with these 6 factors under the 2 broad range. So the 6 factors are information, resources, incentives, competencies, application, and motivation. And it is believed that factors 1 to 4, they fall on the organizational side. 4 falls on both sides. But 1 to 4 means that the organization has a lot of impact on information, on the resources, on incentive, on competencies, which are aimed at influencing the behavior of the staff, of the employees, of the team. So take, for instance, factor 1, information. What kind of information is the organization communicating? vision, the objectives, the expectation, the standards, the policies. And if you are familiar with the COSO framework, information and communication is one of the elements of the COSO framework. And the organization is supposed to communicate, to share, tell its people, train its people, create awareness about what is acceptable around the control environments, the monitoring activities. There is a lot that needs to be done on the information and communication side. So how well is the organization communicating its vision? How well is the organization communicating its objectives? How well is it communicating its expectations? Are they documented? Are processes, updated in real time? That's an organizational factor that will influence how people behave. Therefore, the problem that has been identified, the root cause may be that there is no sufficient information around such a problem. So take for instance, if you identify a strategic risk as the fact that people are not aligned with the organization's goal, it could be that the organization has not communicated its goal widely enough or simply enough for people to understand. And so when people behave and their behavior is not in alignment with the organizational values, it could be because there has been no sufficient communication. Maybe roadshows are necessary. Maybe banners and flyers are necessary. Maybe timeouts at departmental, operational, supervisory levels, executive levels. Different reasons. But you would agree with me that where there is no information, people are at liberty to behave in whatever way or manner they seem is right. If you move to the next factor, which is resources, there may be excellent communication, absolutely excellent information. The intranet, the portal contains details, loads of information, flyers, banners, all over the place, screensavers, workshops. But then if there are no resources for the people to do or to activate that which has been communicated, it becomes difficult. So resources like people, if there are not enough staff across teams, it's going to be difficult for people to act in a manner that is expected. People are becoming stressed. There is no time. If the organizational structure doesn't support the communication or the vision, if their tools are not available or they are outdated or expired or require replacement and the system is not, the organization is not replacing them, if the systems that we are using in an organization does not support the vision of or the direction that the organization is going, these are organizational factors that will influence behavior. Because at some point, people can only do to the limit of what is available, where they are empowered or enabled. If people are overstretched and they are beginning to experience burnouts and challenges, health issues, as a result of not having enough people within their team, if the organizational structure does not encourage teamwork, openness, or the structure or the hierarchy creates a lot of bottlenecks, it is not going to be a problem. We cannot blame that on the employees if they start behaving in a particular manner. And so that's an organizational factor. Same thing for incentives. Do we have incentives? What kind of environment have we created? For instance, when you look at the ESG model, under the governance leg, there is a lot that deals with the issue of ethics, culture, leadership behavior, incentivization, bonus, so many other things around governance. They all come from the area of incentive. Are the leaders walking the talk, or are they just merely talking? It doesn't take long for the team to realize that there's a disconnect between the information in factor one and the behavior that is being celebrated within that organization under factor three. Is the behavior of the leaders and the leadership, does it reinforce positively or negatively what has been communicated during in the information. Is the environment conducive? Are there opportunities for career growth and advancement? What about sanctions for wrongdoing, for negligence? Has there been times that the organization has taken a very strong stand against wrong behavior, irrespective of at what level that wrong behavior happens? Now, all of this will define how people behave. Now, why is the behavioral engineering audit model focusing on the behavior of people? It is because it agrees or assumes that every problem can be traced to a people dimension. So you look at all of the failures, even the most recent of bank failures that we've seen, it is either somebody does something or fails to do something. No matter how perfect the controls that have been designed, if people choose to override it, it will not work. If people choose to collude, it will not work. Even if you get the best of systems, if people choose to behave in a manner that's not appropriate, it will not work. So many things can create the problem. And that is why this tool for root cause analysis focuses on the behavior. And then it's looking at the behavior of people from two perspectives. Is the organization creating a conducive atmosphere for people to behave right? And then are the people themselves motivated to behave right? And then now on the behavior side, so the individual factors, we're looking at competencies. Do people have the skills, the knowledge, and the training? Now this is a shared responsibility. The organization has a responsibility to train. The individual also has the responsibility. They must have that enthusiasm towards learning, towards upskilling themselves and being relevant. Otherwise, when an organization has done its parts and realizes that the individuals in question are not ready, it's either they move them out to a different place or they replace them altogether. What about coaching? What about embedding the learning, commitment? All of these are people-related matters. And so it's basically a tool that touches on the soft part of problems. And many times the soft part of the problems are really the main issues. So the controls are going to be operated by human beings. If the design is perfect and the people do not have an incentive to behave right, it doesn't take time before those controls are broken down. So I hope you take some learnings from the behavioral engineering audit model. Very great tool indeed. In addition to this, there are a few other root cause analysis tools. So we have the Pareto charts, like I mentioned, basically focusing on where the majority of issue is coming from. And the Pareto chart largely works based on data. You have the failure mode and effect analysis, the fault tree, 8D report. Let's take a look at one or two of these ones and then we pause for today. So the Pareto, like I was saying, is just a tool that takes a look at data to pinpoint the areas that require urgent attention. And it's often said that 80% of the problem or the challenges that you need to deal with will be coming from 20% of an area of the business. So where 80% of the leakage is coming from, you may realize that it's just 20% of the entire organization is what is responsible. And so data helps you to narrow down from trend analysis and be able to focus energy and attention on what needs to be fixed. Another tool that is very useful for root cause analysis is failure mode and effect analysis. I recommend this particularly for people who do a lot of project audits, particularly as organizations are embarking on the digitization journey of their businesses and operations. The failure mode and effect analysis simply says, take a look at the project life cycle and think through at what point along that life cycle are there potentials for failure. Identify those failure points and take a look further and say, what is the possible effect of a failure if it occurred at each of those failure points? And so typically in any project life cycle, you have the design phase, the implementation, the planning, and the inspection, or the QA, testing, whatever it is that you call it. Now at the design, usually a very major failure point, because that is where you need to, first of all, do your business requirement definition, BRDs. You also need to do your requirement gathering. Oftentimes, projects fail at that point because sufficient resources and time, our attention is usually not committed to this at the design phase. So it's either the process owners are not taking responsibility by really paying attention to define, they just leave it off to the IT guys. Oh, IT folks, they should know, they know what we want. Or the leadership of the user department who needs the solution have not committed the right resources. So there is a key guy who understands the process end to end, but then that guy is also bogged down with day-to-day deliverables, business as usual issues. So he cannot attend project meetings and be committed to the project 100% because there are reports he must deliver, there are things he must do. At the end of the day, it's an half attention kind of approach. So he gives some overview, he jumps off from the meeting to do some other things because the supervisor is calling his attention. There is a problem he needs to solve. At the end of the day, the problem is not defined very well. The business requirement is not well defined and documented. And then the requirement gathering is not done appropriately. Of course, the design guys will go ahead and design whatever has been documented for them. I've been issued as a problem because at the design points, there's a failure mode that has been activated. Oftentimes, be covered up and signed off. Same thing goes to at the point of implementation, where the BRD is even well documented and the requirement gathering has been appropriately articulated. What has been implemented is different from what has been designed, either because of constraints of time, of resources, project creep, scope creep, focusing on what is supposed to be an add-on rather than what is the core. Sometimes adequate time for planning is not given. Sometimes it is at the testing phase. Sufficient tests or no tests at all is carried out. So all of these can create problems. So when you audit a project or a process, take a look at the process or that project and identify the potential failure modes. That's points where things can go wrong. If you do network analysis, what we call the critical path analysis, or if you do process documentation using Visio or any other tool that you use, there are points within the process that we call decision points. Decision points. At those decision points, there are potential failure modes because decisions are supposed to be made. Is it a yes or no? Yes, go up, no, go down. If the right answers are not provided at those points and the process takes the other route, automatically there's a problem. So those are things that needs to be paid at, that attention needs to be paid to when you conduct a root cause analysis using the failure mode and effect analysis. An example is, take a fuel pump that you need to use to dispense petrol. When a customer requests it as a process, this is a process. Now, two things can happen. There can be dispensing too much or dispensing below the required quantity. So you may say, oh, what just needs to be done is to calibrate that machine, and regular calibration. Yes, on the surface. But beyond just saying regular calibration, we should say what needs to be done. If you dispense too much, it will lead to losses because revenue will drop. We will not make as much revenue as we should make from the same quantity of products that we have. If we under dispense, it can create a reputational damage, customer complaint, and ultimately loss of market share. You know, people run to the competitor, they don't come back to you. Customer complaint can come, and then you have to go back and do investigations, and then reconciliation, and possible refunds, and then of course a bad reputation in the market. So this is a failure mode, point of dispense. What is the effect? We're taking the effect, and then we now say, even if calibration is one of the solutions we're going to be recommending, we must understand what is happening. But beyond calibration, there may also be other reasons. Are there times that the machine momentarily fails? Is it dependent on network? Are there times of the day when this happens? What could be responsible? Could it be weather, conditions, and changes? All of these are important, and they will definitely help us to isolate what the causes of the problems are, and then make a decision. This is where we're going to stop today. When I come back at the third and final part, we're going to be looking at the application now, the use of the root cause analysis. So what we've done in part 1 is to look at the 5W1H of root cause analysis. The second part, we've taken a look at about 3 or 4 methods of conducting root cause analysis. And then in the last part, we're going to be taking a look at the application, the enhancing bits for internal audit effectiveness. Thank you very much. Please keep your comments coming. Subscribe to this channel, like it, and send it to your colleagues. And together we can build a network of governance, risk, and control professionals who are on the top of our game. I'll see you in the next video. Thank you.